So we have all board members present.
Yes.
Is Lisa on?
Yeah, once I bail out, it'll square up.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Now I'm going to go live. I am live, and you guys have a great meeting.
Thank you, Doug.
Thanks, Doug.
So it is 6:01 and we will get started. Welcome to the Fredonia Central School District Board of Education meeting for Tuesday, May 12th, 2020. We start every meeting with a pledge to the flag. So if everyone would rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Thank you. We have a proposed agenda. I need to get everyone. There we go. Wonderful. We have a proposed agenda with one item on the consent agenda. If everyone could review that, and if I could get a motion from the board for to approve that consent agenda.
So moved.
And Tom seconded that. Any comments? Does anyone want to bring that one item back into the agenda? Okay. Hearing none. If everyone who approves the consent agenda would please raise their hand in favor. Okay. I do not have everyone on the board here on my screen, so I'm going to leave it up to you, Ms. Slagle, to take a tally on that. Okay, thank you very much. I just can't see everybody, so I don't know if everyone has voted, and I will just, because I can't, all those opposed, yeah, I know, but that is just going to take me to the second screen. Okay, we're going to leave it. With that, we have Mr. Certicio and Ms. Slagle have some discussion on the board election and the vote process, and unfortunately it's quite a challenge this year, to put it mildly, and to get everything done as we'd like to. So we'll leave it up to Ms. Slagle and Mr. Certicio.
You're on mute, Jeff.
Yeah.
There you go.
I think my wife did that to me. She likes to mute me. Anyway, I thought it was important that we take some time today to talk about. Yes. Are we good now? Okay.
I can hear you.
Okay. I thought it was important that we take some time to talk about the budget and board election process, those things that have been accomplished to date and those things that are still ahead of us. Not only so that the board and all the folks that are in this Zoom meeting with us have the information, but for any of those folks who happen to be watching at home, because this is a very different process than it's ever been in the past. As you're aware, the governor came down with several decrees throughout this pandemic, and one of them was in regard to the budget and board election vote. The number one thing to understand is that all voting will take place via absentee ballot. There will be no place to go to poll. All ballots will be via that absentee ballot. Ballots will be mailed out to eligible voters by Thursday, May 21st. And that word eligible is important here because it's not just those folks who are registered, it's anyone that's deemed eligible. So the district is tasked with capturing of those eligible folks. And we've done that through social media posts, or we'll do that through social media posts and use of our website. We'll also be posting a list of all those folks that we know to be eligible on our website because it'll give folks an opportunity to check the list to see if they're listed. And if not, they'll have an opportunity to request a ballot. Included with the ballot will be a postcard that identifies the district spending proposal. So later this evening, we're going to have another discussion about the district budget. We can also call it the district spending proposal. And we will include, as we're required to, with the ballot, a postcard that has that final spending amount, that up to amount that the board decides on. This is an important point and a different nuance with voting this year. Because of the time constraints, and Christine's going to show us a calendar in a little bit that's going to really help you to synthesize an understanding of how tight these timeframes are. The ballot will not have the actual budget amount listed on it. Okay? This is perfectly legal, and most districts are following this scenario. The ballot will say additional information regarding spending amount or budgetary amount can be found on the postcard that was enclosed with this mailing. You all know, and we're going to talk again at later this evening, that we're in a situation where we're not sure what our state aid is. The tentative plans are to the board to adopt their budget early next week. But in order to facilitate the printing of the ballots by the Chautauqua County Board of Election, we needed to go with the scenario I just described. The ballots will list the two candidates who have declared their interest in serving as Board of Education members. They will be in alphabetical order. That's Mr. Aldrich and Mr. Johnston. They're the only two who declared for the empty seats. The election and budget vote is scheduled for June 9th. That means that all ballots must be returned either via the postage paid addressed envelope that's included with the ballot and the postcard, or through a process of dropping them off at district office. We still need to determine what that process is, when ballots can be dropped off and how to make sure that we can adhere to social distancing. But I know that we will work that out in a short period of time and post those procedures on our district website. The Chautauqua County Board of Elections is really doing a great job. They have been a fantastic partner in this. They're grateful for their flexibility, but they are servicing a lot of districts. And as such, we're all kind of in line on when we're going to have our votes counted. And our votes are set to be counted on Wednesday, June 10th. We will not have our results on board and budget voting day, which is June 9th. We'll have them the next day. I want to thank Mrs. Slagle for her leadership and organization of this project. When I turn it over to her and you see the different timelines that she's been working with, I think you're going to be impressed. Mr. Betts and our team in the print shop have really stepped forward. We have a cadre of our aides who have helped starting today with putting labels on envelopes, and there's another schedule for Thursday and next week as well. So we've got a whole crew of people who are coming together to make this really, really massive project come together. And while historically we have about 500 or 600 folks who vote, we are tasked with sending out about 7,500 the 7,700 ballots. So, and it is a big project. I want to make sure I don't forget that any eligible voter who's not received a ballot should contact Mrs. Slagle, the district clerk. And Christine, I think we settled on a day of, was it May 26th?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So if any eligible voter who has not received the ballot by May 26th, needs to simply contact Ms. Slagle at district office. Before I turn this over to Christine, are there any questions from the board members on this process? Any concerns? Go ahead.
Brock,
Is a person required to sign this ballot
Yes,
or
so
give some
there,
information off of their driver's license?
So
oh,
they are required to sign. There is an attestation. The Board of Elections has provided us with their signature cards or their signature books. So we will be able to compare signatures, to what's sent to us. I also want to point out too that if there are multiple voters in a household, they will receive multiple mailings from us. So if you have four eligible voters, there'll be 4 separate mailers. We are not putting them all in one envelope. Okay.
Mr. Johnson,
Mr. Statizio, all ballots have to be in by the end of business on Tuesday the 9th, is that correct?
Correct, at 5 p.m.
So, so that's a Tuesday, correct?
Yes.
So everybody should probably have it in the mail by Friday?
Yeah, I would think they need to be in the mail
probably,
by Friday or Saturday at the latest. I can tell you that Christine has worked with the post office as well. They understand what is going on and have said that they will make the delivery of ballots a priority. They've also coached us to is it a business reply, Christine? Is that what it's called?
yeah, I'll talk a little bit about that, but yes.
I'll let you talk all about that since you worked all that out. So they have told us, Mr. Johnson, that they will make these ballots a priority, and they understand the time constraint that districts are under.
now, this is the day after Memorial Day, correct?
No, well, the 26th is the day after Memorial Day.
Correct.
Right.
So that's why you'll see when I show you the calendar, that's why it's very important that we get materials out by the 21st so that the post office has time to get those to the voters, and then the voters have time to get them back.
And somewhere on the ballot or somewhere in the mailing, it'll say must be in by the end of business, June 9th.
Okay. Other questions? I'm sorry, Mr. Aldrich.
No, I was just asking Ms. Slagle if she would like to present her portion.
Sure. So, Mr. Sortisio mentioned it as well, but I just wanted to start by thanking everybody that has helped me with this process. The print shop has been amazing. We are very lucky to have a print shop in our district, and that's going to help us in a lot of ways. Most of my colleagues are relying on outside printing companies, and that just makes their timelines even more difficult. So, I want to thank the aides who have really stepped up to help me get all of these parts of the process done. We had a shift today. I've scheduled 4 different shifts, and I'll explain that in a minute. But we had shift 1 today, and it went better than I could have hoped. They were done early. So, like Mr. Sortisio said, this is, to put it in context, there are almost 8,000 pieces of mail that have to be touched several times to put several different pieces together. And, I just could not do it without everyone's help. So, and thank you, of course, to Mr. Sortisio for being on the phone with me for a solid week trying to figure all of this out. So I'm going to share my screen just so you guys can kind of get a visual of the dates that we have as part of this process. So you'll see here the Board of Elections, as Mr. Sortisio said, has been really fantastic working with us to try and do everything they can for all of our districts. And one of the things that they have offered us is printing and counting of our ballots. Initially my fear was that we were going to have to do the printing and the counting ourselves, which really would, slow down the process and leave room for human error. But they are going to help us greatly with that. So some of the time constraints that we have are based on the fact that we are utilizing the Board of Elections to do our printing and counting, but we think it's worth it. And so you'll see on this calendar, I have printing week 1 and printing week 2. If we were to not go with a blank budget amount on our ballot, like Mr. Sortisio mentioned, we would be in printing week 2. And I have been told by the Board of Elections that if that were the case, we wouldn't get our ballots until June 1st. And so that would really leave a very short timeline for us to get everything out and for the voters to have a chance to get it back to us. We were not comfortable with not allowing the voters enough time. And so we wanted to be in printing week 1. And so in order to do that, we needed to say, okay, we are going to print a ballot without a specific amount on it. And that's a big difference from what we've done in the past. But knowing that we are going to accompany the ballot with the information on the postcard. And the reason we can do that is because, our print shop will be able to print the postcard very quickly on a very quick turnaround. So as soon as I know the budget amount, that postcard will be done and be printed, and we'll be able to get that all put together. So just, quickly to go through this timeline. Today we did stage 1, which was putting mailing labels on all of the envelopes. Stage 2, we're going to stuff the return envelopes into the envelopes. And the 14th, Thursday, is also when we will receive the ballots from the Board of Elections. So then stage 3 on Monday will be stuffing the ballots. And then stage 4 will be stuffing the postcard. So my hope is that we are able to get everything out to the post office by the 21st. And that allows enough time for them to get those items in the mail prior to Memorial Day. And then, so the voters will have it by the 26th. And that 26th date, that was a recommended date from our attorneys as to when we should have ballots to the voters. So, we certainly understand that it is very different to send our voters a ballot that does not have an amount on it. But if we did not choose this option, we would have to count all of the ballots ourselves. And, I worry that would leave room for human error since with the magnitude of this project. So we've really tried to communicate as much as possible by using the website, social media. We will get the information out in as many ways as possible in order to have folks understand, how this will look different. And the ballot itself will actually direct folks to our website as well, so they can get more information there. So, I'm just very happy with, like Mr. Sortisio said, the collaboration that we've been able to have with the Board of Elections. I have been told by some colleagues that work in other counties that this is not a normal experience. So, I'm really thankful for that. And again, all of the help that everyone is able to provide to me. So, does anybody have any questions I could answer?
Everybody okay? I will ask, do we know what other school districts in the county are doing? Are they doing something similar to what we are?
Yeah, they all, actually, they all are. There are some nuances between counting their own versus utilizing the services of the Board of Elections. But as you can imagine, when we all got this information at the same time, the superintendent group got together and really talked about how this might work. Christine and her colleagues got together and talked about how this might work. And really through the leadership of BOCES, we came to pretty similar plans, some of which are dictated to us. For instance, in the past, we would send a postcard out, and families would also receive a postcard. The governor's decree, his executive order, said the postcard goes with the ballot. So that's different. Okay, we'll put the postcard in the ballot. We made the decision, as did others, and Christine got clearance from our attorney to put some information right on the ballot, because we were concerned that people would pull the ballot out and not even bother to look at the postcard. So, just guiding them to say, hey, there's more information in that envelope. If you're looking for this information, this is where to find it. But I can say with a high level of confidence, Mr. Aldrich, that the districts in Erie 2, including those in Erie County, are following a very, very similar path to what we're describing tonight.
Okay, so other school districts would not have the dollar amount on the actual ballot. It would be in a postcard?
Yes and no. Some will have it on the ballot.
Okay.
Some will be mirroring exactly what we're doing.
Okay. So I guess my concern here is that because this is a challenging time with everything that is different, and what I would rather not have happen is for us to be an outlier, and that our process is similar to other districts, so that it appears that as if things are being done in a standard type of a way. And I think that it makes it easier if somebody picked this up like the Observer to explain this, or to try and explain this whole voting process. It would be a standard type of a voting process, so that it wouldn't be communicated that every school district is different, and that there is some kind of uniformity and consistency within the voting.
Yeah, I understand that. And really the dividing line is based on size and number of voters. So you look at a school like Southwestern, and they're in about the 7,500 to 8,000 eligible voters, just like we are. And I know that their process is virtually identical to our process.
Okay.
Some of the smaller schools, like perhaps a Westfield or a Ripley, they are probably doing something different, but their numbers don't come anywhere close to what our eligible voting numbers are.
Okay.
Yeah, I can say that, the group of district clerks, we're a small little family, and we talk a lot. So when this first came down to us, the best way for us to all figure this out was to work together. So we had a group Zoom with several different people, and we all discussed what each other were doing. We've all been emailing all week. So we all are doing something very similar. There might be differences based on when their respective boards are approving budgets, or like Mr. Sortisio said, the amount of ballots that they have to get out. But for the most part, we are all following the same process because there's no need to reinvent the wheel when we're all trying to drive with 3 wheels. So.
So I've got a question. I mean, we were sending out 7,700, close to 8,000 ballots, but we only received 6% of people, which is around 500 voters on an average. So that puts us into possibly a size like Brockton, Westfield, some of the communities that you just pointed out. So to the uniformity piece that Brian was speaking, and I know this would be a rushed piece, but my concern is you've got probably close to 65 to 7,000 cards out there. You know, that I just want to know how they're validated. And that was a question I asked earlier. And that's a big concern I have.
Well, I
Because
can
if we see a spike of voters, you know, we jump to 1,000 or 1,500. How do we truly validate that?
I can talk to that a little bit more. So each envelope will have inside of it a ballot envelope, which has an attestation of the registered voter right on the envelope. And that person has to sign off that they are a registered voter or an eligible voter. They have to sign their signature to that. And the County Board of Elections is providing to us their signature book. So what will happen is when that ballot comes in to me, I will open the outer envelope. I will look at the attestation envelope, and I will personally look at every envelope and cross-check that signature based on the signature that is registered with the Board of Elections. And if those signatures don't match, it's not a valid ballot. And there's no room for fraud there because each voter will only receive 1 ballot envelope, and there would be no way for them to send in more than 1. They only get that 1 envelope and they have to sign off on it. So that will be the way that we cross-check.
Thank you.
Sure.
Mr. Forster?
Yeah, just a comment to go along with what Tom was saying. I actually anticipate that there will be quite a few people voting because, quite frankly, all you have to do is sign it and send it back in. So I think that we might actually see a higher number this year than we usually do.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that's a good, a good forecast. I did just want to mention that we've made every attempt to lessen the financial burden of this. You know, we are certainly tasked with doing something that in many ways we have no choice. But working with the postmaster in Fredonia, we've been able to set up what's called a business reply account. And what that means is that we will only pay for the ballots that come back to us in terms of postage. We will not have to pay for putting postage on 8,000 return envelopes. It does cost a little more when it comes back to us that way, but doing the math, it saves us thousands. I mean, this is a case where we know that we are sending out thousands of ballots and we will likely get back hundreds. So, you know, having a way to pay for only what we receive back is certainly, helpful in this case.
Any other questions? Okay, if not, we will move on to the budget discussions. Mr. Sortisio and Mr. Forbes.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Aldridge. And before I turn it over to Mr. Forbes, I just thought it was important that we have another discussion about our budget, go through those things that, and you know, as John has wanted to do anyway, those things that we know and we don't know, with the understanding that we anticipate learning more about state aid later this week. That obviously could be a driving force in our overall budget. But as Christine pointed out, we're under some tight timelines. I am going to make a suggestion that the board consider next Tuesday, May 19th, as the day that they would adopt the budget, and that the following Tuesday, May 26th, be utilized as a day for what's called the adjourned budget hearing, which is a requirement. As you recall, that's something that we do every year. So those are two things that I'm going to want to discuss at some point. But I also think it's important for the board to really hone in on a fund balance strategy as it applies to this year's budget. This year's budget, as you know, will impact next year's budget. There's every anticipation that the current fiscal situation we are in, particularly as a school district, will continue next year as well. And as such, you need to have a good strategy today to make sure you can continue to fund the district as you choose to next year. The other piece that I've pointed out to you before that I want to say again today is that you should fully anticipate that our teacher retirement system and our employee retirement system costs will be significantly higher next year. We have good costs this year because they're always a year delayed. But when the market fluctuates so drastically, often that those TRS and the RS costs are driven much higher the following year. So those are a couple of things I want you to be thinking about as we're going through the budget. And I'll turn it over to Mr. Forbes in a second. But I really want to hone in on what our fund balance strategy is today as that relates to the tax cap. Take it away, Mr. Forbes.
Okay, the presentation tonight is similar to what you saw last time, but as we go through these slides, I'm going to give you some more information. And as Mr. Certisio suggested, the information that we need to at least be focused on today is where do we want to be independent of what the state is going to do probably later this week in terms of a state aid cut. Things the same, and that there is one coming for sure. And the question is going to be how much. So just going through this, we have the state aid pandemic adjustment, which we know is in the budget to come back if the federal funding is not there. So far, that's not come back. We know this one now that we have final BOCES cost in there. You may notice that that's missing from the list of unknowns. Those were submitted on April 30th. There are no new staff positions other than retiree replacements in this draft. And all those positions, as far as I know, and Mr. Certisio will correct me if I'm wrong, have not been all filled yet, although they're in process, the replacements and retirees. And
yeah,
so,
that's correct. That's correct, Mr. Forbes. We are in the process of interviewing, but those positions have not been brought to the board for their final approval yet.
and it says it's April 3rd at the bottom, but this, since your last meeting, we've taken out an additional $203,000, which was through a change in how we're handling some of our BOCES students, bringing them back in-house, as well as some additional line item cuts.
So let me jump in for a second there. And Ms. Farrow, you may have an opportunity to assist as well. I had previously shared with the board that there was a discussion about developing an 811 class, which would be 8 students, a teacher, and an aide, to be housed at our Wheelock campus. This class would service special education students, some of whom are either currently in a BOCES placement or would be scheduled to go to a BOCES placement. So the cost savings is both in reducing the outlay of monies to service students currently in a placement, and also providing an equal opportunity for an education before children leave our campus to go to a BOCES placement. So the dollars and cents, while part of that $200-some thousand is a reduction because we're bringing students back to campus, there's a larger number there that we really haven't calculated of students who won't be leaving us because we're going to educate them in the home district. Ms. Farrow and Ms. Piper and Mr. Drollinger have really worked diligently on working through what this program could look like. Interestingly and somewhat serendipitously, one of our tenants is actually vacating some space. So we're able to repurpose that space for our own needs. We lose a little bit on the revenue side from losing that renter, but we more than offset it with bringing students back into the home district. Any questions about that? And let me further say that this does not require a new position. It will require a new hire. And what I mean by that is later in the board, the board will be asked to approve the transfer of one of our special ed teachers to a retirement opening in a regular ed classroom. So we have an open special ed position, and that position would be assigned the duties, and we would hire for that teacher. Okay. Any questions about any of that? Okay. Really significant work that really has had a positive impact on our budget. So thank you all involved for your work thus far. Go ahead, Mr. Forbes.
So as I mentioned, there is the pandemic adjustment in the governor's approved budget, legislative approved budget. Part of that is offset by the federal CARES restoration funding. We've gotten strong information that there will be an application process forthcoming for districts to apply for that money, although we don't know what that's going to look like or when that's coming. But that is the word that we got within the last week or so, that there will be a process.
So, John,
Yes.
back to the CARES Restoration Act. When I looked it up, it looked like New York State was receiving pretty close to $1.013 billion. Do you have a different number?
It was some large number like that. I don't know exactly, but you're correct. Yes.
Are they going to allocate this money, taking and giving an equal amount per student?
I honestly don't know what formula they use to come up with this. I do know that the amounts vary by district, and this would be our portion of that total pot that you speak of.
When you say our portion, what portion, what number are you looking at?
315,723.
Okay. And so the state, if I recall, didn't the state recall $315,000 of funding to us?
Yes, that's in the line by line distribution of the state budget for our district. It shows a pandemic adjustment line, which shows 315,723, and then farther down, it's a comeback of 315,723 with the anticipation that the state would get that federal money. If for some reason they don't, then they would pull that back out.
So I hear Congressman Reed speaking that if municipalities and other government entities that were promised money that was given to the state, has anybody contacted Congressman Reed or looked into this as to not having that drawn back and then fed back to New York State?
Not at my level. I haven't seen any of that.
There's been letters from the New York State School Boards Association, from the New York State Superintendents Association. Our lobbyists have been working on our behalf, and for those very reasons, Mr. Hawk. I've been in 2 Zoom meetings with Congressman Reed, and that's been a big part of the conversation from superintendents across the state, at encouraging that money not be withdrawn from districts.
So if in fact it's not withdrawn, would we be looking at receiving that money back from the state? I mean, how does this work?
So no, so what they did is when they received that federal CARES money, they cut budgets by whatever amount and replaced it with the federal CARES money. So that's great this year, but what we don't know is whether there's going to be any federal money for next year, or if there's going to be any additional federal money this year.
Well, I kind of wonder about whether or not we're receiving our fair share per student in the dollar amount allocated to New York State. And that's a question that if you have the opportunity in some venue to ask? Because from what I seen and divided by the number of students given through a Google search, we're still $300,000+ short per student in our enrollment in our district.
Yep.
So to that, it seems as if we're having the money taken away and then fed back in a different process, which in turn is exactly what Congressman Reed is speaking of, not wanting to see happen.
And you know, Mr. Hawk, in terms of the way the formula works and how clearly it looks to be disproportionate, no argument. I think you're absolutely correct in your assessment. And it is very difficult to determine how these numbers come about. And you know, people that are much more deeply involved in this than I am, or even Mr. Forbes are, have a very difficult time understanding it. I agree with you. It would be much cleaner if it was a clean and pure formula that anybody could understand. But for a variety of reasons, most of them political, it has been made a very complicated process, and as such, we're left in a guessing game.
All right.
So, yeah, thank you, Christine. So what we did, and talked about this a little bit last meeting, I went through the budget and picked out areas that are currently tracking under what we had budgeted. And I'll spend a few minutes on this. To the right screen here. Currently, and I did this again today, I went through all the line items and matched up all the expenses that we have to date, and then took a look at what I thought was going to happen in some of those areas moving forward. Salaries, for example, we're paying our staff, so I can see what those are going to be. There are other things that, like spring sports, that we're not doing, so I can look at the transportation and those kinds of things for that and figure out what the numbers are. So taking a look at this, let's just kind of give you an idea. The national grid, national fuel, a portion of the contract transportation fuel, which is not listed on your screen, but it was one of the things I picked up today. A portion of the instructional contractual expenses and materials and supplies. Those are planned balances as I build the budget, where I have extra funds in there, which ultimately come in as fund balance at the end of the year. So those are already factored into the projection of spending $546,000 less than our budget on the expenditure side. What also is in there, again, looking at instructional materials and supplies, contractual expense, transportation, fuel, spring sports are the things that are tracking in the budget less because of the pause in New York. And those are also factored into when I talk about the fact I'm projecting that we're going to spend $546,000 less than we had anticipated. What's not factored in there right now is contract transportation. And what you have listed on this slide is the base transportation for April, May, and June. There are specials that would be on top of that. We still have not received any guidance as of yesterday from New York State as to whether we should be paying this contract amount, and if we do, whether we'll get aid back on it. So on the expense side, there will be the pullback of 3 months if we don't pay it. On the revenue side, there will be the pullback of 3 months of aid at 74% of the total expense. So we're still holding those, the April one, and we haven't got the May one yet because we don't know what the state wants us to do with that. There are also areas that we're currently tracking over budget. I mentioned the custodial overtime because we've had a number of staff out. We have the refund of property tax, which is charged against our tax line. We talked about that a little bit last time. We have special ed BOCES, which is a high cost. We have 5 or 6 students that came in during the course of the year that were not budgeted for. There is an offset of $100,000 that I was carrying in special education for the placement of a couple of those kids at Buffalo Hearing and Speech, and that didn't happen. So it's a net of 500 or 432,000 there. Good. Next slide, Christine, please. Thank you. On the revenue side, again, we went over this last time. Nothing has changed from what we saw. We're down in excess cost aid, which is an expenditure-driven aid based on last year's cost. Next year, based upon the number of students that increased this year, should be higher. Transportation aid, again, we transported less to out-of-district special ed locations. So we're down on the aid there. State aid BOCES were up slightly based on expenses with them. Medicaid reimbursement we've talked about in the past. There's no schedule that they give us, but it's based upon the stacks that go against those. And our interest earnings were up $10,000, and that probably will be not much higher than that for the rest of the year because we lost the T-bills. So all of those on the revenue side net out to be about $97,000 less than projected. So if you take into account that I'm showing 546,000 less than projected for expenses, but 90,000 less than on the revenue side, you're basically talking about $400,000 of money coming back against your fund balance. Where in the budget process, we had applied over $1 million, and I had expected to be somewhere around 750 coming back. So we're going to be a little bit low there, but that was part of the plan also, was to slowly reduce the fund balance, and this has sped that up a little bit in the process. All right, next slide, Christine, please. Thank you. Tax cap, we've been over this before. Our maximum allowable is 3.85%, which is a $618,000 increase in taxes. As of this presentation, we are currently 71,000 below that. So we're at 3.41%. And we are allowed to be at 3.85%. This is a summary of where we stand budget to last year. You can see in the far right-hand column, you have negatives in benefit area, equipment, contractual expense. Those are all down. BOCES services is being driven almost entirely by the high-cost special ed students. The debt service piece is your principal and interest. And of course, your salaries are based upon contract. Right now, your total spending plan sits at 2.06%. And then there's the offset on the revenue side, just to show the balance on there. We're currently projecting $1 million against the budget for 2021.
John?
Yes.
So it appears as if we're receiving an additional 122,000 from the state this year as opposed to last year.
Correct. But that's across all categories. Some of it would be BOCES, some of it would be high cost. Your foundation formula is really pretty low in that amount.
Well, I guess because what I'm looking at is I'm looking at it a little differently than you. I'm looking at our revenue side because I see our revenue side, you know, it's sort of rounding from last year at being 29,264,000. And this year we're up that 122,000. So I kind of see a difference between our revenue side and your budget of $1.5 million, 1.547. You're 5.2% over our revenues. Your budget is 5.2% over revenues.
I guess I'm not following you. When you look at the revenue side, it's made up of the three factors that are listed there, or four factors. You have your local sources, which have no change. State aid, we're up 122,000, which is 0.93% on state aid.
Mm-hmm.
And then the balance of that is coming out of your tax levy, where you're up 547,000 right now.
Okay, but if you take your appropriated fund balance out of the equation, because we usually replace that money, looking at our budget budget information booklet you give us every year,
right.
We usually put back whatever amount we allocate in appropriation plus. So just looking at the revenue side, from the tax levy, from the state aid, from the federal sources, we're $1.547 million over our revenue with our budget. Because your budget is $30,933,000.
Right.
And our revenues are $29,386,000, which is a difference of $1,547,000, which is a difference of 5.2%.
Right, the 1,547,000 would be the fund balance of $1 million and the increase in your levy of 547.
Right. So you actually have $547,000 is all we're looking for. So I guess to that question, what expenses did we have last year that were one-time expenses that we're going to not see this year? I mean, I see that we purchased a new cab over tractor. I don't assume we're going to buy another one this year.
No, in the 2021 budget, we've eliminated the request for a vehicle from the maintenance department. That was cut.
Okay. And then our BOCES capital project is $280,000 that we're not going to be, that was a separate line item in the budget status.
Right, I'm just getting to the right screen so I can address your question. BOCES in the 1920 school year, BOCES had $238,000 assigned as a capital expense. That was the 3-year bond of which you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
They also have a separate line, which is $40,000 of their normal capital expense. So moving into 2021, the 238 is gone. You are correct. The 40 went to 92,000. Those are all added in already and included in the BOCES expense line up above. So theoretically, if you were to say the bond didn't go away, your BOCES cost would not be going up 426,000. They'd be going up 700,000.
Okay, John.
That
So
deduction is already there.
what expenses have we not shown that we're not going to have this coming fiscal year? I mean, how much money have we invested in our capital project currently as part of this budget for 1920?
Well, the capital project itself would be unrelated to this budget. We've taken a couple of things that were requests for 2021 and moved those over to capital. A couple of items for the athletic weight room. Help me out, Mr. Statistical. A couple others I can't think off the top of my head.
No, it was really just the 3 items for the weight room that we assigned to the project. We did question whether there were other equipment needs or furniture needs that we could assign to the project. We haven't come to a decision on that. That is a question that I put out to the committee previously. For example, I know right now in our equipment line, we have done away with almost all equipment. Depending on where state aid comes in, if we have to make additional cuts, more likely than not, I'll make the recommendation that there'll be no equipment, which I think would save us about another 86,000 or so, John.
Yes.
So that would mean no equipment for buildings and grounds or custodial. Also in there is about 15 to 20,000 that we earmark for instrument replacements each year. That would take a 1-year pause. Any of the additional equipment requests that are left over from the offices or the schools would be eliminated as well. There is a need to replace the sled for the football team, because the current one apparently is no longer safe, but that's a $6,000 item that we could consider taking that over to the capital project. I have a correspondence in with our construction management group to determine where we are in terms of the unaidable portion of the project. And once I have that information, I'll be in better position to advise the board and the committee on whether we are, number one, whether we have the funds, and number two, whether we have the unaidable percentages left to charge additional items to the project.
And also, Mr. Hawk, if I could just jump on that for a second, some of the areas you're talking about, the building principals have gone through multiple times and reduced the expenses that they have. So for example, the middle school compared to 1920 is down $51,000 in what they've requested. The high school is down 23,000. Elementary is down 23,000. Wheelock is up 12, but they did pick up the kindergarten grade level going over there. So overall, the buildings themselves are requesting about $100,000 less in 2021 than they did previously. You can also see, looking across the equipment line, that we're $93,000 less there. So it's just been a trickle of those things across. Also, under the benefits, you've got this year, which you always pay teachers' retirement salaries cost in the year following. So for 1920, we're paying those percentages in September, October, November. So for those percentages, the rate actually went down, which we're going to reap the benefit of that to 8.86% compared to 10.6 this past year. So that was a couple $100,000 swing in our favor there, which is resulting in the benefit level being decreased as well. So next year, the year after, when you're paying the 2021 salaries in 21-22, that's what Mr. Certisio was talking about previously, where we're anticipating a sizable increase in percent, which probably will be $400,000 or $500,000.
Which I understood what he was talking about. And so we're going to get into the topic on the next page about talking to fund balance expenditures and spending down. Has BOCES stepped up? Because we heard that BOCES had a $16.5 million fund balance. And are they stepping up and looking at applying any of that to the component districts? Because their $426,000 increase from our 1920 to our 2021 budget.
No, that hasn't. Go ahead, John.
I said I haven't seen that at my level.
No, nor mine.
Okay. Has anybody approached them from your level?
Not that I'm aware of. I do have information related to the BOCES fund balance, which I would be happy to share with you. I can't access it as we're talking, but I could do so afterwards.
Okay. That's all I have right now.
Yeah. I would like,
Go ahead, Steve.
I would like to piggyback on Mr. Hawks mentioning the BOCES budget, because here we are at in the pandemic, and we're trying to formulate a budget. But from what I understood from the last meeting, BOCES formulated their budget prior to the pandemic or in the early stages, and so it's a difficult pill to swallow for me that their budget, we have to accept their budget, even though they haven't had to really adjust. So, I guess that's just a general comment. I guess it's water under the bridge. We can't really do much about it at this point, but we're, as I understand, we have to adopt their budget as is. Just a general comment.
That seems to be a very valid point, Mr. Johnson. Thank you.
Okay, so the next two slides are put in with the idea of giving the board an idea of where we are versus where you may wish to go. So we'll look at these kind of together, and then we can talk about them after we go through both of them. The first one shows your budget increase, your budget proposal, your budget increase, your tax levy proposal, what that increase would be in the percent. And you can follow it down about the middle of the page. I've got tax cap listed. That's your 71,000 below that already. And then your choices if you want to go down anywhere from the 3.85, the cap, which we're below, to 0. The dollar values are listed on the right-hand side as to what you'd have to cut or absorb from fund balance to get to those places. And then if you go to the next slide, this kind of talks about the effect on fund balance. I want to spend a moment on this. At the beginning of the 1920 school year, you had a fund balance of $3.4 million, which represented 11.2%. And you may recall that that had gone up slightly at the conclusion of 1819, which we anticipated because that's how we had built that budget in the same manner as I had built it the previous however many years. The board's desire was to try to bring that down to a more reasonable number. And we talked about what that might be at the time. I think we were maybe not in total agreement, but we were talking in the 7 to 9% range was probably a place to look at. So if you take into account the fact that we assigned $1,043,000 in the 1920 school year, and you take into account that right now we're somewhere between 500 and 550,000 or thereabouts of expected underspending in the budget currently, that would take you $1 million out. You put 500 back at the end of the year, and that would effectively reduce your fund balance to about 9.6%. So what we did at the bottom, and I should also clarify that it's based upon the fund balance percentage is based upon looking at your next budget year and taking a percentage of that. So at the bottom, I just chose to use for the purpose of illustration what the budget is as of today for next year. And some of these percentages would change a little bit on the bottom half if the budget figure were to change that you're calculating off. But anyway, so if you were to say, we'll pick a number that you would like to see a tax levy increase of 2% at the bottom there, you can see that's 225,000 from where we are. So if you put it purely against fund balance, that would take your million up to $1,225,000. If we estimate, which is what I'm carrying right now, if everything came in perfectly, we didn't spend another dime for anything, we didn't have any special kids move or anything like that, I'm carrying about $750 to offset your $1 million, again, with that slow bring down in mind. So if you follow that 2% line across, you would be applying 1.2, you'd be bringing back $750 or a decrease of about $500,000. And that would take you somewhere in the 7.8% range for your fund balance. And you can see the corresponding differences if you went more or if you went less. If you went to 0, which I would personally not recommend, you'd be looking at taking your fund balance basically in a 2-year period, cutting it in half. And you'd be looking at having to apply a lot of money in the subsequent budget year to help offset that. You'd be at 6.83%. So now I would entertain any questions on that.
So John, one of the things that's been missing in my view has been a real-time understanding. I believe one board member called it a dashboard, something that's been asked for a little while by myself, as to a real-time understanding as to where the budget is during the year to follow it. Much to the numbers that we receive on our budget status seem to be misrepresented in their placement. So, you know, to hear you point this out, I have a little distrust to actually what you're telling us and how things are being explained. Back to the piece, I see the 547,000, but I don't really understand how our budget went up 547,000 in 1 year. Could you explain that?
Is that your question?
Yes, the 547,000, the increase of 547,000, because the million is just what you're putting back in the fund balance, the applied fund.
Right, just give me 1 second so I can get to the right place and then I can answer your question. Well, as an example, right off the bat, if you were to take a look at only instructional salaries, those in and of themselves, that was 204,000. And on top of those type of things, you have a variety of things like your debt service, which is going up 260,000. And these are things that are normal occurrences in each budget year. Sometimes they go up, sometimes they go down. So we're not putting anything in there that's different or unusual. We're honoring the contracts, we're honoring the health insurance, we're honoring the life insurance, we're honoring the material and supply requests from all the departments. And that totals out to be that.
Okay, so salaries, looking at what you proposed to us on the budget summary, show that it's only a $100,000 increase. Debt service, could you explain that a little better in detail?
Yeah, again, just give me a second to get to the right screen here. So for the 2021 budget year, you're currently going to have 3 projects that will be carried forward for debt service. That's your principal and interest. The first is the lease payments to Siemens, which is a result of the energy performance project from now, about 8 years ago or so. That's 140,000 of principal and 56,000 of interest. Your Excel project is going to be 140,000 for principal, and we're currently projecting, based upon municipal solutions numbers for us for debt service, 470,000 going against the 8.5 project in principal and 195,000 in interest. Now, Mr. Certisio and I do have a phone conference with those folks tomorrow to talk about bonding versus taking another year's worth of a note. But right now, those are the projections they gave us. I also carry, as part of my fund balance, you generally have every year $5,000 as an interest amount in the event that we needed to buy, which we used to have to do years ago, revenue anticipation notes or tax anticipation notes for any reason, just to cover that expense there. All of those total 1.1 million of debt service in comparison to 840,000 in the 1920 year, for a difference of 260,000.
So a lot of these pieces, like the Siemens project, was supposed to be paid through savings in our electric. The XL project and the others were always proposed as to not increase the tax amount or the tax levy. So what you're saying to me now is that down the line, they will increase our tax levy. They have increased our tax levy.
Well, there's 2 parts to it. The first part is that, for using the Siemens project as an example, the energy performance piece of it, we're paying the debt on that. But what that line does not encompass is anything that you had as savings on utilities. So if you were really looking at it tightly dollar to dollar, you would have to take a look at your history of utilities before and after and see if it's tracking less, and then take into account the cost of the debt. And it may very well offset itself. It may be good to the good, it may be slightly to the bad. I don't have that figure off the top of the head, but you'd have to take a look at both pieces of that particular one.
Okay, so you're not taking that into effect when you tell us that we have an increase in that line item.
I would not, when I tell you that there's an increase in debt service, because I can't offset the debt line with the utility line. I would have to offset the utility line with the utility line.
Okay. When it's in the general budget, can you move it from line to line?
You can, in terms of day-to-day operations in general fund, you can transfer between any lines you want during the course of the year, with the exception of equipment. New York State has specific guidelines, which quite honestly, I can't understand for the life of me, that once you establish an equipment line, the only way you can move money into it or out of it is health and safety.
Okay. So really, a perfect storm is being created by accounting.
You have to put it in where they require you to put it in. So ultimately, it does look like it's high in one and maybe low in another.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. So getting back then to the place that we're at, pending, of course, anything that the state does towards the end of the week, we do need to have an idea from the board what you might be looking at as far as where you'd like the total package to go, so that we know what we need to do in order to get there. If you're comfortable where you are now, that's okay. If you want to do something else, then I guess I'm suggesting we get a little guidance today.
So the question really becomes, and where we really need to have some conversation here is, do we continue to follow the fund balance strategy that the board adopted last year, which was to pare down over time the unallocated fund balance with the ultimate goal of getting to about 7 or 8%. That was the goal a year or so ago. And the plan was to step that down over 2 to 3 years. We've stepped that down this year, and I don't know that because we had some significant unexpected special education costs that we did not budget for, and that's one of the reasons why that $1,043,000 that was applied, we're only able to come back with $550. Okay, the plan was really to come back with about $750 or $800. So as we look at that last slide, anticipating a budget of $30,932,000, I really need the board to have some discussion about how much fund balance you'd like to assign. You can see two things there: the tax levy increase on the left-hand column, which would what we'd be asking our taxpayers to approve, 3%, 2.5, 2, 1.5, etc. You can see in the middle column the amount of fund balance that would be applied. I've asked John to plan to backfill no more than 750,000. And that number can be adjusted, of course, as well. And then on the right-hand column, it shares with you what you would have left over in unassigned fund balance. So I said earlier this evening that we need to be pretty strategic in this year's budget and I've said this a few meetings ago, to be fair to our stakeholders who are experiencing economic hardship, but also to protect the district, because next year at this time, it's anticipated it'll be just as hard, if not a harder, budget discussion.
Any comments from the board?
Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, I mean, taking into account everything you said, I look at this as not a 2020-21 budget, but a budget for the next 3 years. We have to look forward, as you mentioned. Increasing TRS costs, teacher retirement service costs are definitely going to happen. We don't know if the state's going to come back mid-year and take $321,000 from us. That's an unknown. And the virus right now kind of runs the show. And we just don't know where we're headed with this. And I mean, it could be that we have a second wave in the fall, and that would really hurt our economy and hurt us ultimately. Or we could have a vaccine or a treatment and it can go away, but we can't forecast that. So I'm new to this, but listening to what you've said, it sounds like you wanted the target range of 7 to 9% fund balance. That was something pre-pandemic. If we were to go at a draw out of our fund balance somewhere to 225,000 to 300,000, that would put us square at 8%, right between that target of 7 to 9%. And not only do I look to the next 2 years, not just this year, but the 2 years prior, beyond this, because it could get brutal. But we have to preserve that. I think we have to, be very vigilant with our fund balance, that we don't draw it down too much this year. And I look backwards also. I look to the last year's budget, and we were at 0% last year. So if we were to come in this year at 1.5% to 2%, I see it as, over a 2-year period. In my prism, I see it as a 1% increase for each of the last 2 years. And I think that, in order to preserve what we have, fund balance wise, I think we have to ask for a little bit from the community. Not much. I mean, we could be at 3.85% by the state. That's way too much, but I think it would be reasonable at the 1.5% to 2%.
Any other board members' comments?
It's Lisa. Steve, I definitely agree that we need to strike some balance between the community and the fund balance, so we need to look out a few years. So I would definitely be looking to stay in that similar range. But
This is Christina. Yeah, I mean, I'm in agreement. I think we really need to be cautious about what the next few years are going to look like. I think many more tough decisions are ahead of us, and I think 8% is still a pretty good number for us to have in our fund balance, and I'm on the same page as Lisa and Steve.
Dave, Heath?
For myself, I am trying to just make sure that, well, I'm just as everybody that's on the board, to be honest with you, and that what is a safe spot? That's basically what it boils down to. What's the safe spot? I'm going to continue to think about that and try to figure out what I see as the best spot. So many unpredictable things down the road that it's almost impossible to figure out what exactly is a safe spot. So that's where I'm at right now.
Mr. Zambrone?
Well, all the points that were made are very good, and I certainly agree with them. But there's just so many unknowns that it's going to be difficult. When do we need to lock this in?
Well, most likely next Tuesday, Mr. Jambrone. So,
All right. Yeah. And I guess I find it very difficult to be asking our community members for money that they may not have at this time. And when I went through this, I thought that looking at some of these numbers, that perhaps 1% would be appropriate, but there were some other good points that were just made for a little more than that, but it's all kind of in the same ballpark. I think this is something that we all probably need to think a little bit more about before we go out to the community and ask for additional monies. And so next Tuesday, is this when that final decision would need to be made?
well, my recommendation is that we schedule a board meeting next Tuesday for the purpose of handling any regular board business, as well as adopting the budget.
Okay.
So I do anticipate, Mr. Jambrone and the rest of the board, that if, as expected, we receive updated information about state aid as late as Friday, Mr. Forbes and I will be sharing information with the board to give you as much time to contemplate that as possible. You'll recall, although it didn't happen last year or the year before, I do believe that at times you've had board meetings where budget adoption meetings where a recess was called to allow Mr. Forbes and at that time, Mr. DeFonso to rehash some numbers and come back and present more information. So it's quite possible that Tuesday, even if we're remote, we may have to, do some work in recess to really get to a budget number that the board can support. You're right. You're all right. There are unknowns right now. And my stated purpose was let's come together, and I think we have, and agree on a strategy in terms of fund balance. And strategy may have to be adjusted. If we get news on Friday that they're cutting $500,000, well, we're going to have to re-strategize. But if we get fair news, then we can pursue the strategy that we've essentially come to agree upon before tonight and tonight as well.
Mr. Certicio, it's Lisa. Do we have, I know we've talked kind of in generalities about, okay, if we had to find that extra 200, 300, whatever, $1,000, what's the kind of the pecking order, or what would be some of the things that we would have to start to consider? Because I think, we can talk about these numbers and the community and the fund balance, but what are we getting for our dollars, or what would we be losing if we say we can't do that? And I think that's as important for the community to understand as well, to say, yes, we're going to take it to 1%, but this is what we're taking out of our district to hold that line.
Yeah. So, as Mr. Forbes mentioned earlier, everybody that oversees a budget in the district is already really taking a hard look at what we can do without. And so, there's already been cuts in supplies. There's been cuts in equipment. There's not been cuts in personnel. There is still about $85,000 budgeted for equipment. Most of that would be cut. And, what the public would see out of that would be that we would eliminate the instrument replacement program for next school year. The rest of that equipment would be, do we really need a new office chair, or is the one we have, can we make do with it? Some new vacuums for our custodial group, those types of things that people wouldn't see. Okay, so that's the first level. The next piece we would look at are, do we have extracurricular activities that are redundant? Do we offer activities that maybe service the same group of students? Maybe they do the same type of function, and I don't know that. Okay? This is just what I would talk to the team about. And if so, can we still offer students an opportunity to participate in those all important extracurriculars, but maybe in a different way? Maybe we consolidate some things so you can pick up some savings there. We could take a hard look at athletics. We have a proposal to add JV teams. Mr. Lauer has shared with me his anticipated participation, and it's fairly high for what he wants to do. We could take a look at any positions that are soon to be vacated and whether they really need to be replaced. Now, I can tell you, when it comes to the retirees, we've taken a hard look at that. I know what it would do to class size in our elementary if we didn't replace some of our retirees. We have already cut 0.5 of a phys ed position, which is a salary savings of about $24,000. But really looking at that shared position between the early childhood center and the elementary, we need that half-time position. We can look at positions where we have multiple people serving in building capacities that maybe they need to serve in a district capacity. So if we really need to make deep cuts, how do we still service our children, but do it in a bit of a different way? And I'm speaking a little bit vaguely because I don't want to alarm our public or our school community. But this weekend, we would be putting things to paper for the board to consider.
That's what I'm asking, are these things that you just went through, is that the level of detail that we would be able to look at to say this is the combinations of things that we want to consider to take out. Would we have that for next Tuesday?
Yeah, that is absolutely the board's role, is to fully understand what it means to adopt a budget and what the cost of adopting that budget is, not just in dollars and cents, but also in terms of personnel. So we do have, and I hope I don't have to roll them out, a whole host of contingency plans from everyone who oversees a budget. And the team knows everything's on the table. And we'll have to take a hard look at it. And my advice to the board will be, if we have to take deep cuts, and some of our neighboring districts have, what can we do that's as far away from the instructional program as possible? I'd much sooner cut equipment for a year than put, 25 or 28, students in an elementary classroom.
Sure. So I guess, I'm sorry, Mr. Chief, I'm trying to understand. So is this list of contingency something that when we look next week to say, do we want to spend an extra $250,000 from the fund balance, or we're cutting A, B, C, and D, and we have that list to say, it's either or the combination, we split the difference, that's the level of conversation we'll be able to have next week.
Exactly. And that's really why I wanted to have a discussion about the fund balance strategy today, to make sure that at least today, based on what we know, we've got some common thinking there. That gives me something to work with. Okay.
Great, thank you.
Well, go ahead, Mr. Hawk.
So I agree with everything that's being said, and my outlook to achieve that is looking for areas that's going to create revenues, and where it is that we're going to be able to look for revenues that have been offered to us in the media through different venues and praised about through politicians, that before raising taxes and before applying our fund balance and before going to our tax base, we have the BOCES fund balance, and Steve Johnson brought up a good point. And Steve, I don't mean to throw you under the bus, but they got a lot of money that could be applied towards helping us and all the other districts get through this issue here of the state budget crunch. It's not our taxpayers. Our taxpayers are not taking a penny back from us. It's the state, our partner. And this is the state public system. And to this, the CARES Stimulus Act, as we were talking here just a little while ago, and I asked you, if it was a simple procedure of a dollar amount per student and what our allocation is, somehow, because when you look through the 50 states, each state was allocated different dollar amounts. So I guess the question that I would ask you to find out is, how did the federal government come up to the dollar amount they allocated to the state? And what is it that we could look for as restoration towards our budget here to maintain class functions, to maintain our level of teaching, to maintain our school system. And so, the two places that I see, three places, is the CARES stimulus restoration. We got to find out about that. And I hope to find out before we get to next week. That may be impossible. The BOCES fund balance, as to what could be fed back to us, because they're sitting on a heck of a pot of money, and the state aid, which you say is Friday.
Correct.
I mean, it's revenue that's going to keep this running here. And to reach out to our taxpayers, I think is just going to be a little tough this year. Last year, it was easy to cut when we had a large surplus and things were good, but it's even worse this year to ask for money when people are really down. And that's the tough thing. And everybody, you know, needs to look at that. So much to what Lisa asked, I guess as soon as you could get those pieces to us as information to review, the better it would be.
Yeah,
As to-
yeah, absolutely. I certainly anticipate we will be working through the weekend on it, and as soon as we can share with the board, we will. And you know, it's a crazy timeline. It's such important work. I can tell you that there was not one of our groups that have advocated on our behalf. NISBA, NISCUS, NICET, they all advocated for the same thing, and it was ignored. And we're stuck with the timelines that we have. So we will do everything we can to provide the board with timely information for their consideration. I do ask, and I will offer again, that if you have questions, and Mr. Johnson and I have had a great couple of conversations the last 2 days, you reach out, and you're welcome to call John directly. You're welcome to call me directly, because you know I want to make sure that this board is in the best position they can when it comes time to make a decision on Tuesday. Okay.
Any other comments? As far as what I see, Mr. Certicio, I think that we realized last year we tried to have some kind of a plan with our reserves, and you know, we didn't want those to increase anymore. They were high enough. We were getting criticized by the state for them being too high, and you know, we argued that this was the reason why they were too high, is because things like this happened. Our discussions with the whole board has been, I don't want to spend down all of my reserve. We're in a position right now where we have to look at spending down that reserve slowly. But I also see a dichotomy enough that financially this has not affected me tremendously. I'm still earning a wage. My wife is still earning a wage, and we're able to work from home. And there are some people in this community, some who have had to shut down. And how do we go to them and say, you know, even though it's you split the difference and say it's 1% per year, how do we go to them and say we're going to increase your taxes 2%? It's tough for me. We're going to increase taxes 2%, 2.5%. I would ask that we look a little more strongly at taking a proactive action right now of cutting expenses to get to a point where we can get to a 1.5% tax increase, 1%, 1.5%, but maintain a 8 to 8.5% reserve. But if we're going to expect this problem to be solved by revenues are, I think that we've got to look at things that are within our control and find ways right now to start cutting expenses. And that's tough to do, I know. I think that we've done a good job of providing a varied educational experience for our students, but somewhere along the line, we've got to get this to balance out.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Moving on to item number
Mr.
4.
Forrester has a
Whoops,
question.
Mr. Forrester, right?
Sorry, just a quick question. Maybe John or Mr. Leticio, you can answer the question. So there is talk that, and again, this goes on an unknown, but it's a possibility of the Congress has put together a bill, another bill to ease the burden of the deficit, and I guess it's like a $3 trillion bill that they're proposing, where there's $6 billion in it for New York State education, and whether it goes to the Senate and passes through the Senate, I don't know. But the question is if something like that does happen after we do this, what happens to those funds? Like, how does that work if you get extra funds from the government?
Mr. Forbes?
That's good through to you. That's a good question. It would depend on the language of the bill and how the money was to be directed. I would be really surprised if Governor Cuomo would want to give us back an aid cut as opposed to maybe not taking a second aid cut. Again, I think it would have to depend on what the language and timing of that package was.
So I guess my thought is, like, if we go to a certain percentage for an increase, but then we get a certain amount of money back, does that, what do we do with it? I guess, where does that go? What does it look like?
Well, as an example, let's say that, I'll pick a date, December 1st, we get $200,000 from the state because your budget's already built in. You've got your expenses lined up with what your budget is. Essentially, at the end of that year, that becomes part of your fund balance. But then you could account for that in the second year's budget as to how you want to pick it up. Or the state may say, we gave you 200 here, so we're not going to increase you later. I really don't know. You generally wouldn't get money and then mid-year adjust your budget, I guess is what I'm trying to say. You would deal with what you had already established as far as expenses.
Yeah, I understand that. I was just curious as where you put if you were to get extra money, where would you put that? That's all.
Yeah, likely it would be fund balance, but again, it would depend on if they took away money for July 1st and then got more money back and they said we're going to restore that amount we took July 1st, that would be, obviously good, and all that would do for us is change what we applied against fund balance.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Hawk?
He's muted.
Sorry, I didn't realize that. So what I seen in the 08-09 financial crisis when I was on the board, when money was restored to us, we restored staffing or cuts that we made. So when we didn't apply it to the budget originally, to Heath's question, we were applying it as we got the money to restoring the cut. Is that something that we did before?
Yeah, what you were doing though, the money wasn't coming back mid-year, which was Heath's question. The money was coming back in next year's state aid run. And so when we got that back, you're correct that we looked at things that we had previously lost or had wanted.
But if to what Heath is saying, we could still restore in that same fashion.
Depending on what the language would allow us to do, yeah, certainly.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Anything else?
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for all your discussions and your thoughts. I know this is a difficult process, and we have minutes from the last meeting, from a special meeting the 21st, April 21st, and a regular meeting of April 7th and 28th. Can I have a motion to bring those to the floor, please, for approval? Mr. Forrester and Ms. Gagenschatz as a second. Any comments, concerns? All those in favor, please raise your hand. All opposed? I can't see everyone's, so those are approved. We now have the financial treasurer's report and the budget status report for March 2020. Mr. Ford.
Yes, typically we've been going, reporting on this and talking about different lines to point out for the board's benefit. I kind of already did that by talking about the fact that I'd gone through today and lined up different line by line comparisons. If you go through this particular document, you'll notice in the area of custodial salaries, which is a 1620 code, we're in the hole there. I mentioned why earlier this evening. You could take a look at our maintenance lines right now. 1621, 400, and 500, which is our maintenance contractual and materials and supplies, and we're well underspent there for a couple different reasons. So we're looking at things that we can do now and charge against this line, and then take it out of next year as possible additional cuts. Things like a couple of rooms at Wheelock School need the tile replaced, and now that we're not in session, we could do that before the end of June. We're looking at the possibility of doing something with the kindergarten or universal pre-K floors, things of that nature. So looking at a document such as this, that allows us the numbers to then look and see if there's things we can do to get those codes up to where they should be. That's all on that one.
Okay, any questions? Okay, the revenue status report for March 2020, Mr. Forbes.
I have a mouse on one computer and I'm using my hand on the other, so it takes me a second. Revenue report, I would like to point out that there was some concern because of the pandemic situation that we would not get our revenue at the end of March from the state. Typically, they give you a March payment and what they call a sustaining payment, which is a portion of what they would typically give you later in the year that they moved up. So those two together were about 2.7 million. You can see about 2/3 of the way down the page on the code that's listed as 3101. Current cycle, we got 3.4 million. So in there, you have those two payments, and then also 743,000, which was excess cost aid against your high cost students. We did receive the next line down, 111,000, which was our scheduled monthly payment from the lottery of 63,000. And then they also give us once or twice a year what they call a gaming grant award. That was 44,000 there. And then a couple more lines farther down, we had textbook aid of 64,000 that came in, and computer software hardware aid, 36,000, and then 9,000 towards our library aid. So all of those things came in as scheduled and expected. And that's all on that one.
Any questions? Okay, we have the Treasurer's Report for 2020. Can I have a motion to at least bring that to the floor, please? Mr. Johnson has made the motion. Can I get a second on that?
It's Mrs. Fortna.
Mrs. Fortna, thank you. John, any comments on that?
First of all, these are just your monthly bank reconciliations, and there's no mathematical issues there. I don't know if I had mentioned along the way, and if I have, I'm sorry for repeating myself, but with the addition of Kim in my office, we've kind of restructured how we're doing these. In the past, I would do 1 month a year because Stephanie was doing the full shot the rest of the 11 months. And so what we've done now is kept Stephanie on doing the receipts and the money part to the bank. And Kim is doing all the reconciliations, then I'm doing the review. So we've improved the segregation piece internally. And then also we had Kim pick up the bank reconciliations for the middle school and high school club accounts, so that helps with segregation of duty in those areas, because the secretaries can deal with the day-to-day and we're dealing with the numbers. So hopefully that will be reflected in the audit report at some point in the future, but we're moving forward that way.
That's good. Any questions, comments, concerns? All those in favor signify by saying, or by raising your hand, please. All opposed? Thank you. We have a resolution for the 2021 BOCES service commitment statement. Can I have a floor, please? Mr. Forrester, and can I get a second? Ms. Gagenschatz. Mr. Certicio, if you could fill us in a little bit on this.
Yeah, this is really just a routine board item that the services that the district requests, the board essentially agrees to and supports. And one of the interesting components with the commitment to BOCES services is just like you pointed things out, is their deadlines are a little bit different than ours. But they are working with all the component districts. As such, it does require them a little bit more time to get their own shop in order, so to speak. And what I mean by that is if they need to increase services because districts are asking for more service, then they need to handle that in terms of staffing. And equally, if there's a reduction in requests, then they need to make some adjustments as well. We have reviewed our BOCES requests with each of our building principals and each of our folks that oversees a budget. I'm confident that particularly with the advent of that 811 program at the Early Childhood Center at Wheelock, that we have really examined our BOCES costs very closely. Again, this resolution is something that's done every year.
Do we have any questions on this? If not, those in favor of approval signify by raising your hand. All opposed? Okay. Again, I can't see everyone, Ms. Slagle, so I appreciate you keeping track of that.
Sure.
We have a.
I just wanted to ask Mr. Johnston, I didn't see a vote there for you.
Am I allowed to abstain?
You are, if you have to state that, yes.
If you have a conflict.
No, I abstain.
We have the approval of the capital outlay project for the 2021 budget. If I could get a motion to bring that to the floor for discussion, please. Ms. Gagan, and a second.
This is Fortna.
Ms. Fortna, thank you. Mr. Certicio, would you fill us in on this, please?
Yes. You may recall that we, the board approved a capital outlay project for this current school year. Because of a variety of issues, the onboarding of a new architect, our time focused on the capital project, and subsequently the pandemic, the work on that capital outlay project, while the design was started, it was not finished. So the way these resolutions are written, and you can see in this resolution as well, the work needs to be completed, started and completed within that school year. Since that didn't happen, we are simply carrying forward that capital outlay project. And in this case, it has to do with signage throughout the district, the Main Street campus, interior and exterior of the building, through leadership of Young and Wright, and working on a design and an implementation plan that certainly will be completed within the next school year.
Do we have any questions on that?
Can I say something?
Yeah, Mr. Forster, I'm sorry.
I just want to make note that I think, Mr. Hawk, I just want to let you know that you've been freezing, and there's a possibility that you might vote yes or no, and but I don't think your screen is showing us anything, so you might want to do it by voice.
Can you see me?
Well, you keep freezing, so sometimes when you're frozen, you might, during a vote, we might not be seeing you raise your hand.
Gotcha.
Okay, so he's frozen with his hand up. So let's ask to vote that he buy dinner for everybody at the next meeting.
I'm in.
Yeah, I think Mr. Hawk,
Frozen with your hand up, Mr. Hawk.
Mr. Hawk, your video is on a delay, but your voice is not, I think.
All right.
That's okay, because Brian's frozen with a big grin on his face too.
I always am. Any further questions? Okay. How are we going to do this?
So, Mr. Aldrich, if I may,
Yes.
this one is a roll call vote, so I'll be doing a roll call.
Yes. Thank you very much.
So since I'm doing a roll call, go ahead and just use your voice for this one.
Okay. Mr. Jambrone, did you have a comment?
No, I have one little question. When
Yeah.
you say signage, is this like room signage or outdoor signage? Just exactly what would that entail?
Both. Exactly what you described. Room signage throughout the main campus, exterior signs for each of the schools and district office, as well as a directional sign when you first enter the campus on Billy Boulevard there.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, if there's no more questions, I'll go through the roll call. Mr. Hawk,
Yes.
Mr. Jambrone,
Yes.
Mr. Forster,
Yes.
Mr. Johnston,
Yes.
Mr. Aldrich,
Yes.
Ms. Gegenschatz,
Yes.
and Mrs. Fortna.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Which takes us item number 8 on the agenda.
Oh, Mr. Alders, we have one more. 6 personnel.
Thank you. We do. We have the approval of personnel to a probationary position. If I could get a motion to gag and shots, and if I could get a second.
I can second, Lisa.
Ms. Powell-Fortna, thank you very much. Any questions, Ceticio? This is a moving of a position, moving of a person.
Yeah, this is our own teacher. She's outstanding. She's been in a special education position with us, and she is interviewed for, and because we follow the same process, even with our own internal candidates with the committee, and with your approval, we'll be assuming the duties for one of our retirees in a regular education post.
Will this woman,
If there's no further discussions, if I could get,
Mr. Giambrone, did you have a comment?
yeah, I just had a quick question. I
I'm-
probably was
go
in
ahead.
our backup materials, but I don't remember. Well, will this end up resulting in a new tenure position for this lady?
Yes. It
Okay,
will.
thank you.
okay. All in favor signify by raising your hand. All opposed? I think we're all, again, I cannot see everyone, so.
Yeah. No.
You're good. Okay. Okay. And the annual district budget vote will take place on June 9th, 2020 by absentee ballot only. Eligible district voters will receive an absentee ballot and return envelope with postage included in the mail. For more information regarding this process, please visit our district website at www.fredonia.wnyric.org. We also have a board meeting coming up next week where we will adopt the budget, adopt the finalized budget that will go to our voters. That will be on May 19th via Zoom. And from there, we will have the budget forum on May 26th, 2 weeks from today. Those are the plans right now, unless further developments, further information changes that, but that's the proposed meeting schedule right now. Patricio, do you have any additional comments?
Yeah, I just want to let the board know that the administrative team and I are working on a correspondence that hopefully will be out to our community on Monday that will outline the expectations for the end of the school year, and particularly what date we'll be utilizing. That's been essentially embargoed information at this point. We also are working on what fourth quarter and end of the year grades are going to look like, as well as a host of other information. I'll leave Mr. Paskey to talk about some of those senior events, but I do know that in the correspondence right now, and I'm sure she'll talk about it again, Mrs. Troutman has a plan to outline some of those middle school events as well. So as of today, as of late this afternoon, it was about a 4-page document where it was kind of a long Q&A for all those different things that people are questioning. I appreciate the community's patience in receiving this, but for a variety of reasons out of my control, I just simply haven't been able to announce some things. So look for that early next week.
Mr. Certisio?
Yes.
I think that's fantastic that we have information going out. That will be going home, but we'll also be using some of our social media to get bits and pieces of that out appropriately, maybe digestible chunks a little bit. It's a lot of information.
Yeah, it is, and you make a good point, and we will do that. But I also think it's important for families who have children at multiple levels to have a document that addresses all 3 schools rather than 3 or 4 pieces of mail. And the other part too is we know that we're running short on resources, and a lot of our resources have been tied up in the budget vote. So trying to be as efficient as possible. But yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Okay. If that is all, then Mr. Zambrone, you are on mute right now, but do you have anything that you would like to add?
No, I don't. Thank you.
You do not. Okay. Mr. Hawk,
No, I don't.
thank you. Mr. Forrester,
I'm good, thank you.
thank you. Ms. Gagenschatz,
No, I'm all set. Thanks.
wonderful. Ms. Powell-Fortna, any additional?
Thank you for all the info tonight.
Okay. And Mr. Johnston,
Nothing to add. Thanks, Mr. Aldrich.
okay. The administration, Ms. Piper.
Nope, I have nothing to add. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Drollinger.
Yeah, I had a family reach out and they wanted me to let the board know. They have 2 students in our building and they just wanted to thank the teachers for the work that they did around Mother's Day. Mother's Day is a big deal in the elementary level, and our teachers did an outstanding job of providing activities that the kids could do at home. And some teachers went so far as to drop things off at individual homes. So mothers would be provided a gift on Mother's Day. So that family wanted me to let the board know that they were so thrilled that the mothers were not forgotten, and the teachers went to the next level to offer that support. So it's a big thank you to the teachers for all their hard work. And that's all I have for today.
Thank you. Ms. Troutman.
Hi, our big event at the end of the year is usually our 8th grade recognition. And so this year we are going to invite families to kind of do a drive-by in our bus loop, and we're going to have our staff and teachers socially distanced, but able to wave the kids on to congratulate them. We will give them a certificate and a t-shirt. And then the following week, we're working on a slideshow to kind of recognize them in celebration. And so we'll do that through Zoom with the families so that all the families can see the slideshow. And then the teachers are planning an escape room to do with the kids that night. So that's kind of what we're working on right now.
Good. Well, thank you. I know that that's something that our 8th graders are going to miss, is that step up and anything, the big event. Mr. Paskey.
Thank you. Our goal really is to focus on graduation as one of our big end of the year activities, obviously. We want it to be a live graduation that will satisfy, of course, all the social distancing requirements. And I think we're all really excited to work with ideas that the parents have already come up with and community members on developing a program that meets our expectations for graduation and what the kids really want and deserve. I'd like to reach out with the parents sometime in the next week, maybe set up a Zoom meeting if we can, and just have some discussions about actual ideas for graduation and doing it live. And if it's not something that we can do at the college, which, you know, with these phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 ideas of reopening New York State, if they're 14 days for each phase, I don't know that we would get to a point where we could do that by a reasonable date. So I want to have a live one, and we have some good ideas on how to do that, and without having to stretch it too far into the future. So we're looking forward to having some discussions with parents about that. Just one more quick one. Our students love doing the clap out at the end of the year for our graduates, where we walk through the school and all of the teachers from the elementary and middle school, and the students come out and clap for them. And so we're going to be planning a similar thing to what the middle school was talking about. We're going to have the seniors come to the school. We're going to start lining up cars at the playground and kind of have them come first serve, and line them up all the way down the road to the Lakeview entrance, and have the seniors come in their caps and gowns and drive slowly through past the elementary entrance, the middle school entrance, around the long road to the high school main entrance around the bus loop, and have our teachers be there, socially distanced, of course, and kind of clap and cheer for our seniors as they go through. And so that's another opportunity for us to give them the recognition that they really deserve, and they really crave the opportunity to see and wave and be seen by their former teachers. So a good thing for our kids.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Paskey.
Very well.
Mr. Forbes, do you have anything to add? Yes.
No, I was trying to unmute. No, I have nothing.
Mr. Rada.
I have nothing to add. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Farrell.
Nothing tonight, thank you.
And Ms. Slagle.
Nothing more, thank you.
Okay. You know, I don't want it to go without being said that I'm very pleased with what the staff and administration, teachers are doing to make this special time for our 8th graders, for our seniors, something that's special. You know, as you all know, with a senior in my household this year, it just seems that everything is getting canceled. And I appreciate everything you've done, Mr. Paskey, and trying to find ways to make this special. Ms. Troutman, thank you for making it special for the 8th graders. They'll never be able to get this back, and I appreciate you being creative, thinking outside the box, and trying to make this special. Again, it means something for me as a parent, not just a board member, but as a parent. Thank you very much. With that, we do need to enter into executive session. We are going to discuss some personnel matters. And after we're done with that, we will come back into regular session and adjourn. There will be no additional business done through that. So if I could get a motion to enter into executive session at this point in time from the board, and we will move into that. Mr. Hawk, there's a motion. And I see Mr. Jambrone's hand up. Oh, yeah, good. Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye. By raising your hand. Yeah. Thank you. We are now in executive session.
Okay.
And I will restart the live stream. And whoever takes over as host duty, this is super easy to do.
Well, we're just going to adjourn, so I guess
Yeah.
you can stay on.
Right. Okay. All right. Well, I will mute myself and let you guys do your thing.
Okay, so we need a motion to adjourn, and that was Mr. Forrester. And I think Dave Jambrone seconded that one again.
Oh, again? Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, all those in favor signify by raising your hand. Yes, thank you. We are now adjourned.
Right.
9:33.
All right.
Thank you very much,
Thanks, everybody.
everybody. I appreciate
Thank you.
I